Stand and join me in a pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. John, will you please lead us in roll call? Sure will. Good morning, everyone. Michael, have you down as the chair? U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Michael Sullivan is here. Yep. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Kathy Doyle. I didn't see Kathy. No. NRCS, Angela Trahon. CPA, Raul Gutierrez. NOAA Fisheries, Don Davis, Ridgedale, Marhindon. State agencies, Louisiana Department of Conservation and Energy. Sarah. Hey, Sarah. Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Carl Blett. Yep. Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, Jeff Leone. Here. St. Bernard Parish, Captain George Ricks. Yep. Blackman's Parish Government, Kimberly Buck. Fisheries, Oyster Fisheries Representative, Brad Rodman. Yep. Shrimp Fisheries, Nick Alfonso. Yep. Recreational Fisheries, Jim Hassick. I didn't see him. No. Punch Training Conservancy, Dr. Eva Hillman. Here. Marsh Property Owners, David Dawson. I understand he's not here. Protected Property Owners, Mike Frizo. Hey, Mike.
Yeah, John, I was
Kathy.
signing in. I heard you call my name, but I was.
All right, we're good.
I'm here.
Welcome.
All right, we do have a forum, Michael. Great, thank you. Just a few quick opening remarks. I have the pleasure of serving as the executive director for CPRA. This is obviously my first time meeting with the committee and being at this meeting. Really look forward to the information being provided today and for the long history that these two sites have had in the program we have managing it. I think we will have maybe some open discussion toward the end of the meeting about possibly trying to meet maybe another time during the year and continue these conversations. So really looking forward to that. I think just a few notes on housekeeping very quickly for those who are watching online. For any public comments, please submit submit an email to coastal@la.gov. Again, coastal@la.gov, and toward the end of the meeting, when we go to the public comments, we will read those out. To members of the committee, please silence your cell phones, and as you may have noticed around the dais here, we don't have enough microphones for everyone, so if you do ask to speak, please make sure you pull a microphone close to you and restate your name if you don't mind for the court reporter so we can get an accurate record. And with that, before we roll into the official agenda, I do want to acknowledge Mr. Gordon Dove. He's leads GOCA and is the chairman of the CPRA board. Someone I work with very closely day to day as we both helped oversee and administer our coastal program. I would like to defer to him for a few opening comments. Mr. Dove.
Thank you all very much, Gordon Dove, chairman of the Coastal Protection Restoration Board, which is the GOCA board, and I am on the cabinet of Governor Jeff Landry, and on behalf of Governor Jeff Landry and the GOCA board, we look forward to working with each and every one of you and making sure we keep a balance in the salinity level issues with Caernarvon, of course, and Davis Pond. So look forward to working with you. A little background, I was chairman of natural resources in the House from 04. I was in the natural resource from 04 to 2016 under Kathleen Blanco and Governor Bobby Jindal, and I was chairman for 8 years, and I regularly started the CPRA board at that time. And I was past president of Interagency, which has a lot of fish in the industry in it, of course. And then I've taken this position. So I've been around here as long as a lot of you have, and look forward to working with you. And my phone and door is always open to any comments, anything I can do to help move us forward in a positive way. Thank y'all very much. Thank you. Thank y'all for your participation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to turn now to the approval of the minutes. I think these have been circulated to the board. I would ask for a motion to approve. A second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Move on to the approval of the agenda. I think this has been circulated to the board as well in advance. Seek a motion to approve. A second? Any discussion? Oh, Mike, sorry. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed? And the agenda is approved. Thank you. I'd like to move on now to why we're actually here. I'd like to invite a speaker up to cover the monitoring of the juvenile and young of the year assessment species through saltwater electrofishing, LDWF, Jason, Adrians. Sorry, I should have looked ahead.
That's perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I was asked to provide a brief presentation of some efforts we're engaging in monitoring juvenile and young of the year assessment species through saltwater electrofishing. And so when I say assessment species, those are our stock assessment species, the ones that we actually model the population for. Some are mandated, some we do just to keep track of those populations. So that would be spotted sea trout, red drum, striped mullet, black drum, southern flounder, sheep's head. So need to give you a little brief history of what kind of led to where we are now. So traditionally, we've had our seine sampling since 1985 that uses a 50-foot bag seine. And you can see there in this picture a little bit, I don't have any better pictures than this one right now, but marsh degradation and land loss, as you all are well aware of, has become a big problem in the recent decades. And it causes issues with being able to conduct our seine sampling. So these seines, you set them out in the water and you pull them towards the shore. However, you need a more gentle sloping shoreline to effectively sample that. You hit these undercut and fragmented marsh like this, that seine net just doesn't do what it's supposed to correctly. So how did we get into electrofishing? Well, this all started back in 2016. We submitted a grant to assess the population, or to try to estimate the population of salt marsh top minnows using electrofishing. That grant was funded through the State Wildlife Grant Program. At the time, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had received a petition to consider salt marsh top minnow as an endangered species or a threatened species. We knew of some sampling that occurred where lots of salt marsh top minnow were captured. And when our data was pulled, you wouldn't see it very much in the data. And so we realized the sampling tools we have aren't very effective. How can we better get at this? So we embarked on this electrofishing expedition with the help of our inland fisheries group. So what did we use at the time? At the time, we used Smith Root 9.0 GPP electrofisher. So this is just one of the standard electrofishers that's out there that's used more in our inland fisheries sampling. But you are able to tweak the settings and do some saltwater fishing. However, it's only effective to about 19 parts per thousand. So what did we get out of that? We were able to develop a population density model for salt marsh top minnow. We submitted that to Fish and Wildlife Service. Eventually, the petition to list those was pulled back. And as of now, I don't know of any further consideration to have those listed as threatened or endangered. So that project started about 2016 through 2018. We began sampling through our coastwide sampling initiative with CPRA in 2018 using the same method. And we sampled through 2023. And that was using this electrofishing gear concurrent at our seine stations side by side. What we realized in that effort, now that effort ended in June of 2023, but what we realized is compared to our seine catch rates, those electrofishing samples had substantially increased catches of those assessment species that we were interested in. Just to give you a little overview of that data, you can see this top right graphic is some of the comparison of the catch per unit effort of our standard seine sampling versus that electrofishing. We highlighted some of those important species. You can see there, red drum spotted sea trout, southern flounder. You can see the increases we saw in that sampling. They're quite dramatic. Those two species that declined, moving into the future, I think those are going to change. They're not going to be as negative or potentially positive for black drum and in a new method we have, and I'll get to that at the end of this presentation. And that graphic on the bottom left there it just simply gives you an idea of some of the other species in both those samplings. And the green bars are the electrofisher, blue bars are the seine sampling, and you can see the difference there. So how did we get what we have now in 2023, so after this ended, this electrofishing through CPRA ended, we became aware of a new novel electrofisher available, and we realized the potential of what we were doing previously. However, it had those limitations of not being as effective in higher salinities. Other states use electrofishing to look at indices of some of their important sport fish. On the East Coast, they use it a lot for striped bass in the estuary. So we saw this technology as something that could fill that gap and get us some young of the year and juvenile information to feed into our stock assessments. We do a good job of picking up the roughly one-year-old recruits in our standard sampling, but we don't have a good link between young of the year and juvenile and those samples. So we want to close that gap. So this prototype came along, and they took it down to Lake Charles in some higher salinity water. They brought it down from Missouri, and you can see there on the left is a spotted sea trout, young of the year, that this unit was able to pick up. In the middle is a young of the year red drum. And not only does it pick up those species, but in terms of biomass, that's several size classes of menhaden in that bucket there. So overall biomass, this unit picks up a lot more as well. So we embarked on getting some funding for this through the legislature. They were kind enough to allocate some funds for this through our Artificial Reef Trust Fund. And we got the first production model in July of 2025. And you can see it there. It's the big picture. And we began sampling in Barataria Bay in July of 2025. You can see all those young of the year spotted sea trout this unit is picking up over there on the right-hand side of the slide, from barely over an inch to it's just a cycle of almost bi-monthly recruits. So this unit is doing what we thought it would do, and we're really excited. So what are our expected benefits from that? We're looking for that robust time series of young of the year and juvenile life stages that we can then incorporate into our stock assessments and combine with our current sampling gear, and hopefully gives us a better, more robust stock assessment. One of the expected benefits is potentially, if we can see these recruitment shifts from year to year, it'll give us some predictive value in the upcoming year class of important sport fish, red drum, spotted sea trout. We can get into a little more adaptive management as opposed to reactive. We can also sample artificial inshore reefs with this technology if they're shallow enough to look at pre and post deployment. The other thing this unit can do really well that traditional gear can't do is sample some of these coastal restoration projects like living shoreline and rocks. So you can get this unit right up next to it, shock up what those species that are colonizing those new projects that a traditional net couldn't get to. You would tear your net up, or drop samplers. You don't have a nice edge there to sample. And hopefully that was brief enough, John. And I'll take any questions, but I'll also be here after the meeting.
Thank you very much. Good reminder, make sure it's on green. Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't have any questions. I'll just comment. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn to say that Secretary Bosworth is very excited about this technology. We at CPRA certainly appreciate it, and our own board member, Mr. Chad Corville, continues to remind us of the potential here and the need for this investment to grow this. To grow this resource for LDWF and to make sure that we have best science and best data available to us. So with that, I'll turn to the committee for any questions, comments. And again, please turn your microphone to green and restate your name for the court reporter.
I've got one. Hey, Jason, maybe I missed it in your presentation. I apologize if I did. What is you mentioned for the old equipment, the effective salinity range, maybe up to 19 parts per thousand, but what about the new one?
Correct. I'm sorry, I did neglect to mention that. We can go from essentially freshwater 0 parts out to full seawater. So that's one reason they named it the Infinity Electrofisher. You essentially can sample the entire salinity regime.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. As we transition to our next presenter, I do want to remind the public online, please submit comments to coastal@la.gov. Again, coastal@la.gov, and we'll read those at the end of the meeting. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, to hear a report from the technical working group, CPRA's own Ms. Danielle Riccardi.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am going to be, my name is Danielle Riccardi. I'm monitoring manager for the Caernarvon diversion, and I'll be presenting operations data from 2024, as well as monitoring data from 2024. And after that, I'll present the operations plan that we're proposing for 2026. And I'll also go into the 2025 data for Caernarvon as well, since we changed up our operations plan for this year. Thought it'd be good if we took a look at what the data looked like for 2025. All right, so we have 2 different committees that are responsible for helping us develop and implement the operations plan. The first group is the larger group, the one that's assembled here today. It's the Caernarvon Interagency Advisory Committee, and the primary purpose of this group is to advise CPRA's executive director, who serves as the SEAC chair, Michael Hare, on information that is relative to operations of the actual diversion. We then have another smaller group. It's a subset of the SEAC. It's our technical working group. And this group meets about a month previous to the meeting of this group. And the primary purpose of that group is to develop the draft Caernarvon and also Davis Pond operations plans that we're going to propose to the SEAC and to the DPAC. So some general background information about the Caernarvon diversion. It was constructed by the Corps between 1988 and 1991, which was also when we started operations of the diversion. It's located on the east bank of the Mississippi River in Plaquemines Parish, and it is composed of 5 gated culverts. The maximum discharge is 8,000 CFS, and it is a gravity-driven diversion, meaning the river stage needs to be higher than the stage of the receiving basin in order to actually have water flowing into the basin. Operations, maintenance, and monitoring is cost shared between the Corps and CPRA. It's a 75%, 25% split. And there is a 50-year OM&M plan that is associated with this project that started once the project began operations. And as of 2025, we were in project year 34. And CPRA is responsible for managing diversion operations as far as day-to-day operations. So the goal of the Caernarvon diversion is really to just utilize Mississippi River diversion to reduce saltwater intrusion in the Breton Sound Basin. And the reason for doing this is to be able to maintain that estuarine gradient in the basin with fresh marsh in the north, increasing salinity and saltwater until we get to salt marsh further south in the basin. The primary objectives that are expected to be attained through operations of this diversion is to enhance emergent marsh vegetation growth, to reduce marsh loss, and also to increase the productivity of our significant commercial and recreational fish and wildlife species. So next, I'm going to go into operations for 2024. All right, so the graph that is on this slide, the blue line is discharge. You can see that there were 2 pulses in 2024, and in total, it was 27 days that we ended up pulsing the diversion. When I say pulsing, I mean operating over our base flow of 500 CFS. It's just 7% of the year. The diversion was closed 107 days in 2024. It's 29% of the year, and that was for multiple reasons. In January, we still had the impacts from saltwater intrusion in the river, so we were mandated to be closed at that point. We were closed for significant periods of time because of low river stage, where we need to close the diversion so we don't get backflow. Additionally, there were multiple National Weather Service advisories, and if they're forecasting flooding for the impacted parishes, we need to close the diversion then as well. Mean discharge for the year was just a little over our base flow. It was 674 CFS. And there you see the first pulse was higher than our second pulse. And the maximum discharge was reached on February 7th. It was 6,820 CFS. And so this graph shows how 2024 operations compared to mean annual discharge going back to 1992. The red line is the long-term average. So in 2024, we actually pulsed 11 less days than we did in 2023, and the discharge was also less than in 2023. And current long-term average of 1,174 CFS was last exceeded in 2012. Couple things to point out here. In 2012, that's when Mardi Gras Pass first opened up, and we started seeing declining salinities in the basin because of more fresh water coming in. Also, Neptune Pass has contributed to that. And also in 2013, that's the first year that we started using an operations plan that is similar to the plan that we use today. And I added in this slide just to show annual Caernarvon salinity for each of the 4 gauges. There's 4 primary, or I should say 2 primary, but 4 real-time gauges that we use to help us guide diversion operations. And this goes from 2008 to 2024. If you look, in the orange is Stone Island. Installed that gauge in 2015. That's why we don't have data prior to that. But if you look in the more recent years, say 2016, 2017, 2018, you see that salinity for each of these gauges is considerably lower than it had been previously. It shows the impacts of a freshening system. Right, so a reminder about our operations. We have two primary gauges. We have Stone Island that is located close to our 15 part per thousand established isohaline. And we use that gauge from January through May and in December. And then we have the Crooked Bayou gauge that's located further up basin. That's nearly on our 5 part per thousand isohaline. And we use that gauge as our primary gauge between June and November. We also have two additional gauges, Snake Island and Bay Gardine, that are located kind of midway between these isohalines. And they're used to provide additional salinity data for the basin and as a backup if one of our gauges goes down. And I do want to note, we're no longer following this plan. When I speak of this plan, this is the plan we used for 2024, but we are now operating differently, as I'll discuss soon in 2025. Right. This is the 2024 plan that we used. There is a 14-day salinity moving average that we track throughout the year to decide whether or not we can pulse the diversion. We use a 10-year monthly mean salinity and develop a range that is plus or minus 1 standard deviation to guide operations. There is a low salinity trigger, meaning when the salinity gets to a certain low salinity, we cannot pulse the diversion. We need to be operating at base flow. And on this graph to the left, that's when we operate using the Stone Island gauge. To the right is when we operate with Crooked Bayou. That low salinity trigger is going to be the higher of either -1 standard deviation of that 10-year monthly mean salinity or 5 parts per thousand. So whichever salinity is higher for that gauge. 500 CFS base flow, that's what we typically are operating at. We have 3 consult periods with Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, one in March for brown shrimp, and then 2 that are May through June and September through October for important oyster reproductive times. Just noting there is a new plan in 2025 that we developed in response to declining basin salinities and the impact that was having on the way that this plan was formatted. It was lowering our salinity range. All right, so this is the first gauge that we'll look at. This is Stone Island. It's the one that we use from January or December through May, and then yeah, that's right, December through May. The areas that are shaded on this graph, that just indicates the time when this gauge is being used as the primary gauge. Again, the red line that you see there is the 14-day salinity moving average. The blue line shows discharge from the diversion. Annual mean for the entire year was about 10.1 parts per thousand. And then the mean for just when the gauge was being used for operations was 9.5. So pretty fresh compared to that 15 part per thousand. Also looked at the 14-day salinity in relation to the range when it's being used for operations. When Stone Island's being used for operations, it was within the range, about 88% of the time, and above the upper range, 12%. And then further looked at this, considering the different constraints we have with operations, like low river stage or having to close because of a storm. The maximum days additional that we could have pulsed, this gauge was 25, and it's unlikely we actually would have been able to do that, and that runs it right down. That would be running salinity right down to that -1 standard deviation or 5 part per thousand low salinity cutoff. Same analysis for Crooked Bayou. This is the gauge that we use June through November, and it's the one that's located on the 5 part per thousand isohaline. 14-day salinity moving average, 3.9. And then the mean when it's used for operations, again, is represented by the shaded area on this graph, is 2.8. So a bit fresher as well. Looking at the 14-day salinity moving average in relation to the range when it's used for operations. In range 92% of the time, and above the upper range 8%. And there were no days that we actually could have pulsed due to either salinity being too low or the river being too low in order to operate. So the salinity did get high in November, but we had to close down the diversion then because the river stage was too low. This graph is showing a comparison of mean monthly salinity at the Caernarvon diversion in relation to discharge, which is the graph at the top, and river stage, which is the graph at the bottom. The bars, the blue bars, represent either discharge or river stage. The lines represent salinity, mean monthly salinity, for the 4 real-time USGS gauges. So one thing you can notice is that in January, that's when we had the highest salinity at all the gauges. At that point, the diversion was closed, and also the river stage was really low. It was less than 4 feet at that point. We then begin to see in February and March, that's when we were able to pulse the diversion finally. We had our highest discharge in February, and the river started to come up as well significantly. So salinity responded in kind and came down. As of April, we switched to base. And so if you look at the upper graph there, discharge was around 500 CFS or low then April through December. So the diversion was no longer having any impact on salinity operating at that point. If you look at the river stage, the river stage continued to come up. It was at its highest in May and then in June, and that's when salinities really bottomed out in the basin, and we saw salinities almost approaching zero at some of these gauges. Then as the river began to decline, July, August to the rest of the year, salinities began to increase. So the salinity is really being controlled here by the river water that's coming in through the passes. When the river stage drops down, that's allowing the salinity to come back up in the basin. And there are other things that influence salinity as well. Tides have a significant impact during times of the year, wind speed, direction, other things as well. Okay. One more way to look at salinity. This is a map of interpolated salinity in the Breton Sound Basin for the year. These are annual salinities, so all the squares that you see, all the dots on there are annual salinities at those gauges. There's about 24, 25 gauges that we use that monitor salinity. The one thing to note here is that there's a very obvious increase in salinity from the west to the east. It's freshest along the river there where Mardi Gras Pass is located, and then also right at the Caernarvon diversion in the far north as well. The highest salinity was located at Stone Island, and that was 10.1 part per thousand. So we weren't able to actually interpolate a 15 part per thousand line in 2024. We were able to in 2023 because of the drought. And that is shown on the graph as well. It's the white dotted line. So it did get pretty saline in 2023 relatively to how it's been lately. The 5 part per thousand line in 2024, the interpolated line was about 6 miles down basin of the target isohaline, indicating the basin was fresher than what we were trying to attain. And it was fresher than in 2023. Oh, and also wanted to point out the lowest salinity, the lowest mean annual salinity for the year was at Crims 148, which is the station that is located closest to Mardi Gras Pass, and mean salinity there was 0.5. Right, so we're going to talk quickly about vegetation. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. So I looked at 4 different stations, looking at the coastwide reference monitoring system. I chose a station that's closest to the diversion, one that is furthest to the east and is in Salt Marsh, the most saline site that we have, one that's located mid-basin, and then one that's located closest to Mardi Gras Pass. And it's kind of hard to see on the graph with the dots, but the different colors indicate different salinities of marsh. Main thing I want to point out is that top line there, that's Crims 148. That's the one that's right by Mardi Gras Pass. And what we saw since I think like 2006 or so, a change from brackish marsh to intermediate marsh to fresh marsh. So that marsh is really undergoing transition, whereas the marsh that is located further east we are seeing a decline in some of the smooth cordgrass out there, but it is remaining firmly a salt marsh. The site that is located mid-basin is remaining firmly a brackish marsh, and the one that is located furthest north by the diversion is mainly remaining intermediate marsh, but it is trending towards a fresher marsh environment these last few years, and that's because there's been an increase of biltong at that site. So also at the one in the site in the middle of the basin, Crims 135, that one might be showing some signs of transition to a fresher marsh. We are seeing patents decline in abundance, and some other species come in that have more of a fresher tolerance. Very quick, this just reiterates this is the station that's by Mardi Gras Pass, that's closest to Mardi Gras Pass. So if you see the red color up there, that is Spartina patens. You can see over years how that's declined. That's when it was categorized as brackish marsh, 2017 to 2018, intermediate marsh, and we started to see a shift in species, and then 2019 to 2024 is being categorized as fresh marsh, and we see a change in species composition again. And I added this graph because we don't yet have a quantifiable assessment that we can present that shows land change in Big Mar. The diversion water, it exits first into Big Mar, and this area is the most impacted from diversion operations. But I did want to show, this is just Google Earth imagery. 1985 shows pre-construction, mainly water in Big Mar. 2025, we have a lot of land building, including, we have like a crevasse splay that has formed where the water comes into Big Mar. So we have had land gain, and we will be able to present quantifiable data either in our next annual report or the one after that. We're going to have an analysis done on 2024 imagery by USGS, and we did get one completed for 1998. That's serving as our baseline report, or our baseline data. It doesn't really show a whole lot at this point, but that'll be some new data we can add coming up. All right, so next we're going to go over wildlife and fisheries. Just some basic information. All of this data is collected by Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and it's used for different management purposes, such as setting seasons and establishing fishing regulations. It is all fisheries independent monitoring data, so the data is collected from wildlife and fisheries stations, some of which are their standard sampling stations, and some which were added specific for Caernarvon. The past 10 or 11 years, data collection has been most consistent, so when making comparisons, they can more easily be made more recently than looking back, say, to data that was collected in 1960s, 1970s. Some of their data sets go way, way back. All of our fisheries data is available in SIMS, and there's also a lot more information on wildlife and fisheries websites specific to different species, as well as in an annual report that they produce for us every year that is also available on SIMS. This is just going to provide a very general assessment. All right, so the first thing is waterfowl. They conduct annual surveys, September, November, December, and January. They're conducted every year. Did want to point out in September of 2024, they couldn't complete the survey because of Hurricane Francine. So these data actually include just the other 3 months. For the 2024-2025 survey, there was 10,863 birds counted in the Breton Sound Basin, 12 species. Most were in intermediate marsh, and most were surveyed during the January aerial flight that they conducted. As far as species, coots were the most abundant. That was followed by blue-winged teal and black-bellied whistling ducks. And did want to point out that the black-bellied whistling ducks, there were none counted during the previous survey for 2023-2024, and there were a total of 1,698 counted for the 24-25 survey. So that was a pretty big increase. And this graph just shows the total counts and how they've changed over time. From 2023, there was a pretty good increase, and we're close to the long-term average. Let's see, and it was, highest since the 2016-2017 survey. One thing to see here, the counts go up and down drastically. There's no real trend that we're seeing, although the last several years counts have been pretty low in the Breton Sound Basin. And waterfowl, migratory waterfowl, are impacted by a lot of things that are, outside of our basin, outside even of our state. So a lot of impacts that can be kind of difficult to tease out if you're not an expert like wildlife and fisheries. All right, the next slide shows alligators. We have seen an increase over years in alligators, especially since the start of operations in 1991. They conduct annual aerial surveys of nests. It was done in June this year. And there was a decline in 2024. They counted 147 nests. It was about a 19% decrease from 2023, still above the long-term average, though. And again, the increase, we have been seeing a pretty good increase since 2013, which may be because of an expansion of fresh and intermediate marsh in the basin, because it has been getting fresher. So count's still good, but they have been on the decline recently. Oysters, Wildlife and Fisheries does 1 meter square sampling annually in July to assess the resources on the public seed grounds. There's also 2 additional samplings that have been done, that have been added in May and in September and October, specifically for CPRA. The total stock, 4,557 barrels, and it was a 89% decline from the total 2023 stock. Also, for the July sampling, there was no seed collected. It was all sack. And for the additional May and September, October samplings, they didn't sample any seed or sack during the samplings. And this graph shows counts over the past 10 years. See, 2024, no seed, and then low sack. 10-year average is 15,148 barrels. Next, brown shrimp. This is the dominant shrimp that's landed during the spring inshore season. And the catch per unit effort, it was below the long-term average in all 3 year types. 50-foot seines, really low, but it was actually the highest since 2018, but not by much. So yeah, there were declines in 16-foot trawls and in 6-foot trawls. It looks a lot better for the white shrimp. This is the dominant shrimp that's landed during the fall inshore season. The catch per unit effort was above the long-term average for both the 50-foot seines and in the 16-foot trawl samples. In the seines, it was actually the second highest catch per unit effort since 2012. In the 16-foot trawls, it was the second highest ever. 6-foot trawls, second highest since 2013. But kind of low, and it was below the the long-term average for the 6-foot trawls. So salinity is higher during the white shrimp season. The river's much lower, and that is when salinity begins to rise in the basin. Blue crabs, not a whole lot to say here. Counts remained low for blue crabs. They didn't change much at all from 2023. Largemouth bass, really not great. There were 0 fish caught in 2024 in gill nets, and only 8 fish sampled with a 50-foot seine. So catch per unit effort is low for both gear types. Also pretty low for red drum, but stable compared to how it's been the last few years. And this is catch per unit effort for gill nets and treble nets. And for spotted sea trout, we saw an increase both in gill nets and in trammel nets. It rose above the long-term average for gill nets and still below the long-term average though for trammel nets. But there was an increase for both species, for both gear types. So in summary, the Breton Sound Basin has been getting pressure. Largely through because of a lot of water that's coming through the passes on the east bank of the river. Salinity was lowest, closest to Mardi Gras Pass, and then it increased west to east. We looked at our annual interpolation of salinity in the basin. The freshwater input that is coming through these passes, it is really impacting our ability to pulse the diversion because it's been so fresh. We've only been able to pulse 27 days in 2024. Mean discharge 674 CFS. And to point out again, we did adopt a new plan that I'm going to talk about in a few seconds to address these changes that we've seen in the basin. Freshwater input through the passes is influencing marsh composition. That's most obvious with the stations that are really close to Mardi Gras Pass. And due to the infrequent Caernarvon operations, we can't really make any sort of assessment on wildlife and fisheries in the basin based on 27 days of operations. So impacts there are more so being driven as far as hydrology by river input into the basin. And that's it for the monitoring. How are we on time? Good.
We're right on time. Thank you very much. We'll pause very quickly to see if the committee has any questions or comments. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the presentation of the recommendation for the 2026 Caernarvon Freshwater Diversion Operations Plan. And again, just another reminder to the public, if you're watching online, please submit comments to coastal@la.gov. And in the subject line, please put CIAC. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So for 2026, we are proposing the same operations plan as we used in 2025. The changes that we incorporated in 2025 are, first off, before we were using 2 different gauges and we were switching back and forth throughout the year to serve as our primary gauge, we monitored salinity to determine whether or not we could pulse. We switched to using just 1 gauge in 2025. It's the Snake Island gauge. This one is located more mid-basin, whereas the other ones were located further north and further south. The range that we're using, which is the green shaded area that you see on there, and that's salinity that's graphed on the y-axis. This is based on an oyster salinity range that was provided by the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries with an understanding of what potentially could be attained and would also allow us to operate the diversion to some extent. And did want to point out that the first operations plan in 1991 was actually based on an oyster salinity range, so kind of went back to where we started with this one. The plan continues to include wildlife and fisheries consultation periods for brown shrimp and oysters. It's the same as we had before. And we do have a 2 part per thousand buffer that is a salinity buffer that is above the lower salinity range. It's not actually drawn on this graph, but we incorporate that. So if the salinity, the low salinity is 5 part per thousand, we actually have a buffer that extends up to 7 part per thousand to make sure that we react in time to prevent the salinity from continuing to drop and actually go below the lower range of our salinity. All right, so that is the plan. What I am showing here is what our data look like for 2025. So in 2025, and again, this is through current, I would say, we have pulsed 23 days. So a few less days than we pulsed last year, or 2024, which was 27 days. And we had 3 short periods where we attempted to pulse. We did in February, but we started having a declining salinity, and we were getting close to that buffer, that 7 parts per thousand buffer. It was a weekend that was approaching, so we did return to base flow at that point. Then we tried to pulse again as salinity began to come back up, but we had to close pretty quickly because there was a coastal flood advisory. And then we tried to get in another really short pulse, which lasted like 3 days. And salinity just started dropping really rapidly in the basin at that point because the river was coming up. So yeah, that's our operations. So looking at the salinity right now, we could pulse. It's above our buffer. It's actually really high right now, but the river is too low. So we can't get any water out of it right now, unfortunately. This graph is the same graph you saw earlier, looking at mean annual discharge. I have a star there that indicates 2025. So right now, discharge is actually a little bit higher, our mean annual discharge, than it was in 2024, but it's anticipated that's going to decline because we have the diversion closed right now, so that will end up lowering our final 2025 assessment. And 38% decline from the long-term average of 1,174 CFS. So pretty similar to what we were looking at last year. And then I did also compare 2025, looking at the current plan that we have adopted. And I compared that to our previous plan, if we hadn't changed how we were operating, if we were still using those 2 gauges, and only looked at salinity. I didn't take into factor river stage or anything like that, just to see how this plan has changed our potential to operate if conditions are right. So Stone Island, if we were using the previous plan during these months, 88 days. During the current plan, during the same time, 75 days, we'd be able to operate. Crooked Bayou, the previous plan, 2 days. During the same time, 7 days, actually a little bit more during the time frame when we would have been using the Crooked Bayou gauge. So total days, previous plan 90, current plan 82. So we have been limited by 8 days, but it's pretty similar. It's pretty similar. All right, and that's everything for operations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that we are the recipients of your summary, but I just want to say thank you very much to you, your team, and the technical advisory group for taking what is seemingly some simple objectives to operate this system and looking at a wide range of data to continue to inform our decision making to give us a fulsome picture. So with that, I'll turn to the committee for any questions, comments.
I do have a question. So first of all, great presentation and wonderful data. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
So taking into account the overall objective of the diversion to establish an appropriate salinity gradient, and then looking at some of the specific goals, which are to reduce marsh loss. I realize there are so many constraints, obviously, on the operation of the diversion.
Yeah.
To what extent, if at all, do you incorporate sediment load in the river with operation of the diversion?
So we operate, I mean, we're so limited right now that we operate at this point when we can. And if sediment load is high, then wonderful. But it's not really something that is allowing us, like in March, April, maybe when the sediment load is a little bit higher and the river is continuing to rise. We can't always pulse at that time because of salinity coming down in the basin because the river stage is going up. So if that is something that concurrently is a factor, then that's a huge benefit. And that's something that we'd like to be able to maximize, but we're just limited by what we can do. So, yeah. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions, comments from the committee? I think with that, we will turn to a brief period of public comment. No?
I don't have any.
Oh, no public comments online? Okay, great. I think for members of the public, please approach the microphone, state your name and any affiliation if necessary, and please limit comments to 3 to 5 minutes.
I need to sit down. Pinch nerves are no fun. I'm Alan Drake. I'm a semi-retired engineer, and I'm doing this as a public citizen. I have a handout that I proposed for the 29 master plan, but I think you could implement it in the Caernarvon Basin before then. Everybody pretty much agrees that mangroves are good. Their roots in the salt water or saline water or even fresh water trap silt. The roots also provide a nursery for all sorts of sea life. The trees provide surface friction and slow down a storm surge that hits. So they're kind of a good thing. So far, y'all have been depending upon, I'm talking about the entire authority, the natural spread of mangrove. I propose a low-cost alternative that has 2 unique features. One is to provide free seed to commercial fishermen to disperse where they think it might do the best. And they know the area far better than anyone else, except for some scientists, and also give free seed to any scientists that are there. And the other one is a kind of an observation. Mangroves do not die. They die when there's a hard freeze. But we don't get a hard freeze every year. And I have some data from New Orleans International Airport on the coldest day for the last 50 years that I'm also going to hand out. And if a tree gets to about 4 years old, and that's kind of a by golly, by guess number, and they die, they still provide benefits while standing there. And I've talked to mangrove experts, and nobody can say how long, other than it's over a decade, that a dead mangrove will stand there before it topples over. So if they're planted, they get at least 4 years of growth. Then if they're killed by a frost, they're still providing significant benefits. And the cost-benefit equation, I think, is highly favorable. So within Davis Pond and Caernarvon, if you would seriously consider providing a little bit of money to collect free mangrove seed to give to commercial fishermen to disperse in the area, I think it would provide benefits in multiple dimensions that mangroves provide. And here are the some handouts if you could just hand them to each other. And I also have the temperature at New Orleans International Airport color coded for the last 50 years. And I just think this is a overlooked opportunity to use nature. And on any artificial impoundments that you make, for example, they're trying to build a wall through there, armoring it with mangrove seed. And the Moreau Foundation has a limited effort to plant seeds, funding additional direct planting, not of seeds, but of seedlings that are a year old, would be a way of keeping these from eroding and disappearing quite so quickly as hurricanes and other forces come in. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for the comment. As we pass these around, I think we'll make sure any extra copies are left near the door for the public if they'd like to see them. We'll keep one for our record. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the public or comments from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item. This will be a roll call vote on the approval of the 2026 Caernarvon Freshwater Diversion Operations Plan. I'd like a motion to approve. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Motion for Michael, a second. All right. Yeah. And for this, we'll proceed with a roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Man, last thing I had to do. Any discussion on the operations plan? Sorry. Or the approval of the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to the roll call vote. Thank you.
All right, let's see. We'll go back through the list, and I'll just call out your name since we established who you are earlier. So Michael Sullivan, or actually, let me rephrase that. I'll do the agency. So Army Corps of Engineers, Michael. Yeah, I guess a yes or a no, or a yay or nay. Yeah.
Yay.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Kathy.
Yes.
NRCS, Angela.
Yay.
EPA, Raul.
Yes.
Dawn Davis with NOAA Fisheries.
Yes.
There you are. Department of Conservation and Energy, still struggling on that one on DNR. Sarah.
Yay.
Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Carl.
Yes.
DEQ, Jeff.
Yes.
St. Bernard Parish, George.
Yes.
Plaquemines Parish, Kimberly. Barely a yay. Got it. Thank you. Oyster Fisheries, Brad Robin.
Yes.
Shrimp, Nikki.
Yes.
Yes. We don't have recreational. Lunch, Train, Conserve, let's see, Dr. Hillman.
Yes.
No marsh property owners and protected property owners. Last but not least, Mike Fariza.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so that's unanimous. So, yeah. So,
And with that, thank you all very much. I think we will now turn to new business. Any new business from the committee?
Yes, please. I would like to propose that the committee meet more than just one day a year. Maybe mid-year we can get together. And not so much a formal meeting, but more in the sense of maybe a workshop where we can educate one another. So these decisions based on just data from wildlife and fisheries or different agencies can also incorporate real-time experiences from the folks in the field, such as myself, the fisheries, And it would just be an opportunity for maybe the agencies to get a better understanding of where we are and us to get a better understanding of where you guys stand when these decisions are being made. I just think it would be some good input. And again, nothing formal. Maybe we get together, bring some folks in if you want to, if we need an expert to come with us. Although I think we're all experts in our fields, it would just be some helpful information, I think, to help us move forward in the future. Any feedback?
Appreciate that. Any discussion by the committee? I'll say I certainly like the idea, and I think figuring out a way to structure kind of a mid-year meeting is something we've talked a little bit about already. Appreciate the recommendation. So we'll put something a little bit more formal together, circulate it with the committee, and then look for some dates middle of 2026.
Yeah, okay, I'll add something too. So I'll just ask, we were thinking kind of midsummer, kind of middle of the year. And Michael had thrown this idea out to me before, and I just remind everyone, we used to have a 3-hour meeting for Caernarvon. We like we did today, but very briefly, but in the past, we had multiple experts, research, everybody come in. So that's kind of the idea, and that's a great idea, Michael. I think we can make that happen, formal meeting or not, to be able to bring in new research, all the data that we already have, and like you heard from Danielle today, and then just give us an opportunity, give y'all as a committee an opportunity to have a little more input than before we get to the technical work group. So again, great idea. Just wanted to thank you for that.
Any other comments from the committee? Please.
What this gentleman was talking about with the mangrove bushes and all of that, me as a commercial fisherman, I see everything out there. Can this be put in for the next meeting to see if we can approve something or some kind of way to get this going? Because as a commercial fisherman down there, I can get many people to throw seeds. And if there is any benefit off of it, it's a new learning experience for everybody. Because that's what Caernarvon used to be, mangrove bushes, all of it. I grew up there before the diversion was built. I think this is a terrific idea, especially if it don't cost much to do. So if this could be implemented into the next meeting to see how we can go about this. Thank you.
Certainly think that'd be appropriate, and obviously many of us with our respective agencies, I encourage you to take the proposal back and see how your agencies can evaluate it as well. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Dove, defer to you if you have anything.
No.
All right. With that, I think just before we adjourn, I just want to thank everyone for their time today. Thank those who made presentations, and for everyone on the technical working group who put in countless hours to get what was a summary for us, and I think very enlightening and very fulsome in covering that data. And again, before we adjourn, just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and a very safe New Year. With that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. And a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And with that, the committee meeting is adjourned.